Hi, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for coming, Fred and Pam.
Ray cannot make it. He's got something going on, but he'll be better next month, and he sent some comments on the SSF, so.
Okay, that's great. I'm sorry for the late start. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties, which hopefully within the next, few weeks, before our next meeting, we'll have it straightened out. But I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank Pam. I want to thank Pam particularly for putting that package together. That was extremely helpful. Okay, the minutes for January 19th. Do I have a motion to accept these minutes?
I'll move to accept the minutes of January 19th.
Okay, that's great. It's been seconded, so they are approved.
We should vote on it, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm added.
Okay.
Now there's a bunch of, the reports are really coming at us here. And she's giving us deadlines to get the comments in. And we're trying to keep up with them, but it's not that easy to do. We submitted comments on the remedial action work plan. Does anybody have any question about that before we move on to the new stuff?
So that was the remedial action work plan for the site-wide soils and sediments, phase 1.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
we have comments in this packet.
We have comments in this packet, mostly coming from Fred. Thank you, Fred.
I had an interesting couple of emails exchanged with Karen Nandberg.
I did, I saw those, yeah.
I had mentioned my comment that there was a dust standard, something or another that was stated for rural towns.
Right.
And
90,
she emailed me saying, "Oh, where did that come from?"
I saw that email, yeah.
And so I found, we actually did the right thing. We put a reference in the document we wrote about this.
Yeah, I saw that
It
document
came from
too.
a book.
Mhm.
And I sent her the name of the book, and I also sent her a copy of the dust sampling document we wrote, and I haven't heard a word since. I think it's interesting. She was after a standard, I think. She wanted me to say something like, we used the Minnesota state standards from 1987 for this, but
Right. I just wonder if she
We
hasn't
had-
gotten back to us. I wonder if that
we had
Is-
gone to a book, which is a better reference.
So do we actually think that in the 100%, she identified everything that we commented on in the 95%, which is why I put the 95% comments in this document.
I have the,
Because we could still send her more comments.
I'm gonna send a raise comments.
Okay.
Did you have, Nick, did you have any particular comments on that, remedial action work plan for the site-wide sediment and soils?
No. I did, Pam had flagged me about the possibility of a what is it, a
Discussion about
pollinator
the-
meadow. A pollinator meadow. And I have some comments on that whenever's the right time for it.
Okay,
This is for restoring the holding basin at the top.
Yeah,
of
this is the
hill.
restoration.
okay.
So the reason I asked him about that is because there's this discussion about whether they're gonna put 10 feet of clean soil on top of the cap or not. And I suspect that it's gonna be a hard argument for us to get that 10 feet, even though that's what was in the ROD. And so we might wanna have a plan for what we really wanna do with, what we would really like to see happen to the cap of the holding basin.
Why do we want 10 feet?
That's a good question. We wanted
Because
10
nobody-
feet so that people might dig there by accident and not disturb the cap.
Or drill a well, but nobody's gonna build
on the top.
Put a grill on top of the holding basin.
To let you
Isn't
know,
that forbidden?
the Mass DEP guideline for contaminated properties is 15 feet of clean material on top of contamination. So, they're not, I thought we might get, when this first started, I thought we might get 15 feet, but obviously they stopped at 10, so.
Well, no, they're not stopping at 10. The rod says 10, but they're asking for 2.5 feet.
That's true, but keep in mind, and this is one thing I thought about, that material is supposed to come from building A. The, not, uncontaminated material from building
No,
A.
the stuff on top of the cap is not supposed to come from building A. What came from building A, the stuff that filled it up to the
Right.
level of the cap.
Right,
That they use
So,
to fill it in now.
what they're saying is that qualifies as being clean material. Based on their sampling, and that's the point I'm not sure about, okay, I don't think, I don't think it necessarily is.
That is material that's going to end up inside the containment field. Inside the containment structure, inside the concrete, inside the cap. It is dirty. As long as it doesn't have PCBs in it, if it's only got the chemicals that were in the holding basin, then it is appropriate material to fill that out, even if, do we think that there's PCBs in there that they didn't characterize?
There could be uranium in there, but everything is supposed to be below the record of detection limits. So that's my question is, I don't have any problem with seeing this material that's there, stay there. But I want to see it further characterized. I think if they're gonna leave it there and they're gonna call it clean fill.
Yeah.
They're not calling it clean fill. They just made Terry feel more comfortable.
Well, then they
Yeah.
need to.
They're
go
saying,
back in
they are
there.
literally saying they are reducing the clean fill above the cap from 10 feet to 2.5 feet.
Right,
And my question is that a reasonable amount or not?
no, I don't think so. I would like to see that whatever material from building A went into the holding basin to bring it up to grade. I would like to see him recharacterize that. Because, hey, isn't backfill really supposed to be imported material?
Well, I thought
They
they would move it from other-
Clean.
I thought that, well, yeah, but just because it's below the record of decision levels, doesn't mean that it's clean. I mean, if it's, so long as it's less than 2.7 milligrams per kilogram for uranium, they can use it according to the red. It doesn't mean that it's clean.
And are we sure?
It has contamination in it.
And there's no characterization of that somewhere?
There is, it's the building A characterization of it, but I want them to go a little bit further than that. I have no problem with it staying there, but it just needs to be retested before you,
Retest for?
Yeah.
For what?
for a contaminant concern. So what all the contaminants, which is what they're testing for in soils, PAHs. And PCBs and depleted uranium and metals.
Okay,
If they were to resample that and recharacterize it, and it came back. That it was below the record of the decision levels. I would have no objection to it. Even though I would really like
okay,
to
so
see.
we are arguing about two different things. You're arguing about soil that's going to be inside the containment structure, and I'm arguing about the number of feet of soil that are going to be above the containment structure, protecting the cap. So these are two different things. I think they are done. There's no way they're digging that stuff out.
It's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna be, they're gonna fight tooth and nail not to have to dig that stuff out.
Right. And it's not unreasonable for it to be inside the holding basin containment structure, is it? I mean, did Kevin have a problem with it? Did crew have a problem with it?
So what you have, I wish I had a board here. What you have is you've got the contamination of the holding basin, which is, at least 10 feet below grade, contamination of the holding basin, okay?
Mhm.
That's got the liner on it,
Right.
the impermeable liner,
It's probably
supposedly,
15 feet.
whatever's
down.
left of
Yeah.
it, okay? Then on top of that, you've got this stuff that they dumped in from building A, which I have questions about. And then they're gonna put a cap on, and then they're gonna put 2.5 feet of clean soil, okay?
Oh,
So-
I thought the cap was gonna go right on top of the contaminated material.
So the cap,
In order to do that, Fred, they would have to dig that, building A material out of there. Which they still might do. They still
But
might
you
do,
want the cap and the cover to be, to not stick up above the surroundings. Right, so.
that was,
right.
that's,
So if you start at what the ground level is going to be when it's finished, you go down a certain number of feet through fill and reach the cap. And then I thought if the cap is put right on top of the contaminated material, there's should be lots of room over it for fill.
so,
But if they put the cap on top of the fill.
So
then
they
you're
have
limited
used-
the amount of stuff you can put on top of the cap to keep it at the desired level. And how thick is the cap gonna be?
that's a good question. I don't know
Yeah.
how thick it's gonna be, there is a figure of it, I don't have it with me.
so
But it shows the basic structure of the cap and how thick it is. But unfortunately, I don't have that with me today.
No,
So,
I don't either.
they filled in the holding basin up to grade. They are planning to put everything that they've filled so far inside the containment structure. Why is there a problem if there's uranium in that?
You wanna have it more than 10 feet below the surface though.
That
It's
may-
gotta be, it's, because that was what the record of decision says.
But that's not, that has nothing to do with if you're saying that you still want 10 feet of clean fill on top of the cap, which is what the record of decision says, says nothing about where the level is below.
Right,
You know, they're saying maybe that's clean fill, but that's not really clean fill. That's not their excuse, because if you were to break through the cap, you've destroyed the remedy there. So the reason that they did that is because they're functionally disposing of more materials at the site. Inside the sarcophagus, if you think about it that way. And then the question is whether they really need 10 feet of soil on top.
How high is the wall gonna go around the?
Wall's
This
gonna
is
go to
related
grade.
to how high the wall goes at this.
it's gonna go to
building.
grade, that's
The
not gonna
wall's
be
gonna
a-
go to grade.
Right,
Gonna
So
go up
okay,
to
so
grade?
up to the grade, yes. So
I would
if,
think you'd have to protect the wall and put fill on top of the wall too.
you're putting, if the fill would be on top of the wall too. It's gonna be up to the grade that's there now. And then they're gonna put a cap over it, and the cap covers the wall as well as,
Okay.
so that
okay.
it drains to the sides of the
Yes.
sarcophagus.
Yeah,
If they have to dig out, then they will have to put weep holes in the wall in order to let the cap that is subsurface to the top of the wall
right,
drain. And they don't like that idea.
right.
So we're talking about what goes on top. But you're still arguing about them digging out what was there because you don't,
The record of decision says 10 feet of clean material,
Yeah.
okay? So we have that right now in the holding basin, okay? what I'm not satisfied about is the fact that, it just seemed to be a rush job getting that building A material into the holding basin, because they were in a hurry to do it. And I would like to see a further pre-characterization, not a pre-characterization, a further characterization of that material, before anything goes on top of it, okay? If that comes back, that everything is below, the recommended decision levels, then put the cap on, and then put your 2.5 or 3 feet of clean soil on top of the cap. The cap can't be I agree, cap can't be at surface. It's just gonna be too easy to
Okay,
damage.
so you
Bury
want,
it deep enough so that any machine.
I'm not gonna ask them to dig that stuff out, but I want to make sure. Because what happens if there's contamination in that building A material that they didn't see, they missed?
well, if it's uranium, that's a fine place for it.
Even though it's less than 10 feet below surface.
It's not. So you're thinking that you might actually have that being 2.5 feet, being that the cap itself would be not enough to protect you from being exposed.
Yeah, I want them to follow regular position and have 10 feet of clean material, above the waist. Okay, you're right, we're trying to figure out where the cap should be. But, if the cap can't be on the surface, I think that's pretty
So,
clear. But can it be 3 feet down below the surface?
so,
Why not?
so hang on a second. So anything that's under the cap is protected from exposure. You cannot be exposed to anything that's under the cap. It is isolated inside the sarcophagus. It is isolated. You can't eat it. You can't track it away. The only way you could be exposed to something is if it's radioactive and the radioactivity was getting through the cap.
Okay, the cap's not gonna be concrete.
The cap's gonna be clay.
Right, caps, or some other type of material, not the whole thing is gonna be, but there's gonna be different layers of it. And I don't necessarily think that that's enough to protect people. I think you've got to have that 10 feet of
10
unimpacted
feet to
material.
protect you from what?
But protect from anybody from mistakenly digging in the area, for one. And then what about the residual uranium contamination? That might be in there too.
Well, again, from my perspective, anything that's under the cap can have as much uranium in it as,
I don't
You know, up to-
think the cap is gonna protect us. I think you've gotta have that soil buffer.
A
too.
foot of earth cuts radiation down factor 10, I think.
yeah, I don't think,
So-
and a foot of clay,
Yeah.
a foot of clay, a foot of earth,
Yeah, the same.
you're really,
Well,
okay.
then you still could have an issue with somebody accidentally digging 10 years from
Well,
now,
I'm
20 years
thinking
from now.
about
And so they're going to,
The 3 people come in and decide to park their crane on top of the cap. You need enough earth to
And the other thing too,
prevent, something damaging the cap.
so they're going to point out that it is much easier to inspect a cap if it's near the surface to see if there's damage. If
there's a lot of
somebody-
reasons for them to put that cap closer to the closer the surface, the better for them.
Well, the other thing is that this is not something that the NRC has said, no matter who owns this site, they're not putting a parking lot there, right, Nick? That it's right next to the wetlands there, that they're not gonna want it paved. I can't hear you. Are you muted?
Yeah, correct. They're not gonna want it paved. They want they want a pervious surface, something that water will go through.
So, and I've heard that potentially they were talking about a pollinator meadow. I heard that from, was that actually discussed, or did he
It
just?
was discussed it was just, Gary brought it to the attention of the Natural Resources Commission at the last meeting. And it was well received as a possibility. I think the sort of the characteristics of a pollinator meadow, that means no woody plants, basically. It just means annuals and perennials, so nothing deep rooted. It does mean, depending on the soil,
What is not deep rooted? How many feet is not deep rooted?
about a foot.
It's interesting, roots can go through clay, probably.
Yes,
Yeah,
roots,
yeah.
so if it,
But-
so
and
in
it can
other
also
words,
go
No,
through phosphorus.
annuals and perennials, typically, you're talking about something that's, 6 inches to at most, 18 inches below grade. And probably mostly it's shallow. You're not talking about tap roots like trees will put down or anything like that.
That's
Um,
good. For 10
and
feet.
What you are talking about, though, is the soil has to be suitable. So whatever soil is put there for pollinator meadow has to be tested in terms of suitability for the plants, nutrient levels, whatever.
and this is something that would need to get mowed once a year?
Yeah, once the annual mowing, so that it need to be planting. Some of the stuff would be hand planted, like might be little things out of plugs or pots that would have to be, hand dug holes and planted. The rest of it, most of it probably would just be seed that was sown, broadcast on the surface.
Mhm.
And then there would be annual mowing. And then it's likely, any meadow like this, you're likely to get some invasives over the long term. So there might be some need for annual or occasional removal of invasives, but
So if you wanted to, I think about my backyard and the number of places that I have little maple trees growing.
Yeah.
Even far away from where my maple trees
yeah,
are.
but the annual mowing kills those. The annual mowing takes care of woody plants.
Okay, just once a year is enough to get rid of.
Once a year is optimal. Optimal.
Okay, and so how often would it have to be inspected for invasives?
Every year or two, not very
So
often.
every year it would also need an inspection.
Every year or two. It's not, it depends.
Well, so what we're talking about is an institutional control. In other
Yeah.
words, we can
Yeah,
say.
I think if it's,
take
I think
ownership or
it's,
not.
it's fair to ask the Natural Resources Department to indicate what their requirements would be in terms of soil access, both before the meadow's established and after the meadow's established. And what route, basically a maintenance plan.
So you're talking about the NRC potentially doing the annual mowing and the annual invasives control?
Possibly. I'm not sure exactly how they do that on conservation properties, but potentially them or someone who has the right equipment. They might contract that out.
See, I actually think of this as, this is an institutional control for this site.
Right.
It's close enough to a wetlands that we don't want it paved. We want it set up as a meadow. We need it mowed once a year. We need it inspected for invasives once a year by somebody who knows what they're doing
Right.
with that. And those are the institutional controls we would want for that site.
Right. Mhm.
And you think 2.5 feet of soil is enough for that?
Oh, that's
That we
plenty.
did that.
Yeah, that's
2.5.
plenty. Just a question, the soil has to be suitable, which means it needs, it needs the right nutrients and organic material in it so that it'll absorb water and all of that.
But in other words, if the institutional control is that somebody's mowing it and inspecting it, then somebody could dig through it, but then it would get fixed.
What happens if the town doesn't take the property? We kind of lose control
But
about what's going on up
if this
there.
is the institutional control, whoever owns it.
Yeah, I see institutional control, but does institutional control mean inspection of the cap? And repair of, damage to the cap? What about the cap itself? Well, we're actually talking about the 3 feet of soil on top of the cap, but what about the cap itself? So what happens if something, 10, 20 years down the road, somebody goes in there and decides they want to, dig in the cap area, for whatever reason? Let's just say that the town doesn't take the property and it takes, it's,
Well, let me speak to that a little bit. I mean, typically, if you can assume that the property gets put into a conservation easement, then, you put suitable markers on it to indicate that nobody should have access beyond a point. And, you can do things like that, which are controls. Now, they aren't hard controls, but, they're the sort of thing you typically do with conservation areas.
So the NRC would have access to this site even if it was
Well,
a private
I imagine that this would be deeded to the NRC. The way all conservation properties in town, not all, but the ones that are owned by the town are deeded to the Natural Resources Department.
owned.
So, I mean, that's a pretty good control if the town takes control of it and, Delia creates a management plan and puts that on file as this is how it's going to be maintained now and in the future, no matter who the director is.
Well, what if there's not a conservation easement for it?
Then I can't tell you anything.
But it's still within the wetlands footprint.
Well, yeah, I mean, given my work on the Conservation Commission, basically you expect to be presented with, a map showing the wetlands flagging, and then I can tell you what the rules are. And
It's within, I mean, there's holding basin and then there's.
if it's
a
within
path
if it's within
wide
100
and
feet,
There's wetlands.
well, the wetlands could extend significantly beyond the bog, okay? Because the
Mhm.
wetlands are characterized by the nature of the soil and the plants that are growing there, not by whether or not there's water. And
Mhm.
it's just that the water, whatever. So, anything within 100 feet would probably qualify as wetlands area and subject to the Wetlands Protection Act and the town's bylaws. So someone would have to come
The
to the
very
town.
first wetlands map of the town, with the very first wetlands maps that they had, actually included the holding basin as a wetland, because that's what Dan Monahan actually marked as. So that was an interesting thing, because they had to actually get kind of like a waiver to dig it out, because it wasn't a Superfund
Right.
site at that point.
Right. So assuming that nothing has changed and that still governs, then, that's an institutional control, right? Anyone who wants to do anything in there is supposed to come and get permission from the Natural Resources Commission and the state and possibly the state.
Mhm.
So do we want to come up with a unified statement as to what we're looking for in the holding basin? Because it seems like
So
a little
you're looking for a characterization of the stuff that's gonna be under the cap.
further cap, well, first of all, where's the cap gonna be?
Yeah.
How far below grade is the cap gonna be? It sounds like it's gonna be
Well,
3 feet.
But it sounds to me like it sounds like it's gonna be 3 feet.
Okay, so, my concern is that the 3 feet to 7 feet. We know that the top 3 feet are gonna be okay, because that's imported material, but my question is, what about 3 to 10? What's in there? We don't really know. We need a further pre-characterization. This is the time to do it
Okay,
now.
so we're saying that the position is, if you want to reduce if you want to change the rod, which CARE is going to do,
Well, the
basically,
rod says.
the rod says 10 feet.
Well, the rod says 10 feet of clean soil, but does the rod specify where the cap is gonna go?
The rod
Does
says
it
10
specify,
the cap is supposed to be 10 feet below.
does it say that in the rod?
Yeah, I think it does. But in other words, if we want to come back to her with a position, our position is that we want to see if you're going to change the 10 feet to 3 feet, right, then we want to see the material that was used from building A characterized so that we're sure that there's not a high enough
Right.
exposure level of uranium that.
Or
floods
anything
the
else,
surface.
or
Or that there are PCBs, which the containment structure was not meant for.
Yeah.
And we want to be sure that the institutional controls include maintenance of an appropriate meadow that, like
right,
like a pollinator meadow,
I don't know.
where there's annual mowing and annual invasive inspections and
Right.
checking on the surface, so.
So this is a big change for us because we were looking at a cap 10 feet down. So if we're willing to change our position, to have a 3-foot cap, that's gonna be, that'll help, to Maximus out.
That will help them
They
access
won't
that.
they won't have to remove all that stuff that's in there to get down and put a,
As long as they've characterized
As
it
long as
and
they've
it's
characterized it.
suitable to be inside the containment structure and it's not a risk at the surface.
Yeah.
With only 3 feet of fill.
yeah, agreed. Is that, Fred and Nick, do you agree with that position?
I think, yes,
You don't sound so comfortable with it.
I have not a good idea of where the cap is going with respect to the grade and.
So were you in the site visit when we walked around on top of the holding basin?
Yeah.
So the cap is going there,
All right.
right where we were walking. And then there'll be another 3
That's
feet
where
of,
we were walking.
well, there's a path and then there was, people actually walked out on the holding basin, didn't they?
No,
They were workers there.
the last time we were there, we were on
We were on the bank of it, the bank of the.
Yeah.
bank, and
But
there was a
basically
path
where you're
leading
looking,
down to the holding basin.
There's gonna be a gray, the holding basin was filled in the last time we visited.
Yeah.
They already put the
It-
material.
That material is not gonna come out.
Yeah.
They don't
Well,
want it to come out.
they don't want it to come out. We might argue that it should come out. But
That's what we've been arguing all along, but if we can change our position a little bit, just to expedite things, provided that we know that there's sufficient safeguards.
well, and we could get a pollinator meadow planted there and we could get them responsible for maintaining it. So. But in other words, if they're reducing the size of that, then we need to be sure that they're doing inspections for
Yeah.
plants to be sure that they're not plants that are gonna grow through that cap.
Nick, you're all set with that? What about Fred?
Are you comfortable with that? Nick?
I think that.
say it again, say it again.
Okay, so they wanna change from having 10 feet of clean fill to having a small amount of clean fill.
3
And
feet
3 feet.
approximately,
Is that what they actually say in the latest
Yeah.
document?
3 feet.
So if we,
Well, they didn't say in the document, but they said it during the staff, the meeting that we had the
I
trail.
don't think that's enough, if that's where the top of the wall is gonna be too.
no, the top of the wall is going to be right at the grade that we were looking at. They're gonna dig the wall level with the grade that they're gonna put a
Okay.
cap that is gonna be over the area that was there and the wall.
Okay. I think
And then there will
cap of
be
What, of
Clay.
some number of feet thickness,
Yeah. Yeah,
which is 3 feet, 5 feet?
I don't know.
7 feet,
Is this, I had a question though, is this 10 feet or 3 feet or whatever it is? How is this contained, well, how is this contained? There's no supporting wall or anything around it, it's just a heap of soil?
I think it's gonna fit in with the grade around it. So it might be, if you've looked at landfills before, you can see that they have slope sides.
Yeah, so that means it would have to extend out, if it's gonna be covered by 10 feet, then the slope, the base of the slope is out way beyond. I'm just trying to imagine how that's gonna look.
Well, that's what they're saying. They're saying if they wanted to put 10 feet on top of that, that would change the grade for the whole site and would really make drainage an issue. So that in order to actually still put 10 feet there, they would have to dig out some of the material that they've put in to build the wall.
Yeah.
And put weep holes in the wall so that the cap didn't extend over the
well,
wall.
the wall isn't built yet.
Yes,
They
the
could
wall
dig
is-
out, and digging out another
But this is
another 3 feet of earth, that's very little compared with the amount of digging they're gonna do
well, a little
every
7
place
feet over,
else.
7 feet over. But
It's-
that puts the grade lower for, that makes it a risk for their machinery that's working to put the wall in.
That cap is not gonna be, it's gonna be, what's the word I'm trying to think? The cap is gonna be, won't be any higher than I'm sorry, the wall won't be any higher than the cap. So in other words,
No, if we made them dig out material that's in there.
Yeah.
Kara has said that they will put weep holes in the wall and the cap will not extend above the wall.
Right, and
And
so,
that makes it less likely to work as well. So,
but even under, if they have 3 feet of clean soil, that
I
that
think that the
wall
thing,
is not gonna extend above 3 feet, that's gonna
the
be,
thing that bothers me is not whether the soil is clean or not, because clean is a pretty high standard.
the
Here,
soil above the cap.
look,
I'm bothered, but 2 feet sounds like not enough, but I'm thinking
I-
mechanical down, the wheel rut will go down a foot,
A what?
a wheel rut. Drive a truck out in the mud and get it stuck, and you end up with wheel ruts.
So,
Um,
so the deal is though, that if it's only 3 feet, it's a lot easier to service the cap if you had to repair it.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah,
not-
that's
not
one
to
good
have
reason
to
for doing
go
it.
in to service it, it's,
but,
Yeah.
but I don't see the wall extending above the cap, so if the cap is 5 feet down, then that's where the wall is gonna end. If the cap is 7 feet down,
The wall is
That's-
going to be built, this is what Kara has already approved, to the level that the soil is at now. If we argue that there has to be 10 feet of clean fill, then the cap, and they dig out inside the wall 7 feet for that reason, then the cap will be inside the wall,
down 10 feet.
down 7 feet and 3 feet of
And then-
fill on top of it. or
And
whatever,
then,
10
where
feet,
will
3
the,
feet.
where will the wall end?
The wall
Uh,
ends 3 feet below the surface where,
So the wall is not gonna be, attached to the cap, it's not gonna, I,
yeah, that's right. She's saying the decision's basically already been made. That we end up with a lot less functional containment structure if we argue for removing some of the soil that's in there.
that's another good reason for not, for not asking for the soil removal. I think the soil is in there is okay, it just, it needs to be characterized.
Okay.
That's my position on it.
And I think
it-
I think, again, that you will want you to characterize the soil and make sure there's not PCBs.
Right,
And that the uranium is at a low enough level that people sitting on top of it are gonna be safe.
right, because that's just keeping with the ROD, the ROD says
Yeah.
10 feet of clean material, so.
That the,
Yeah.
and that above the cap, there's gonna be at least 3 feet of material, 3 feet
Yeah.
of clean,
Yeah.
clean soil suitable for a pollinator meadow.
Exactly, and then
And that
the
there's,
wall,
and that the institutional controls will include mowing and inspections
Yeah.
for invasive.
and so the cap and walls will become a true containment structure. It'll.
Yeah.
Right, because the cap is gonna.
And you're still
It's
uncomfortable.
probably gonna
well,
be,
I don't have enough information to really be comfortable or uncomfortable. I need to see a diagram or a map of where the surface level is gonna be, where it is now, and where the
So
top
we're,
of the contaminated material is.
do you want me to write this up for Kara and say,
yeah, I think,
this is what we're thinking of. We're thinking that maybe if you're going to insist that if you're really thinking about changing the 10 feet on top of the cap of clean fill, that these are the things that we would need to see happen, whether
Yeah.
Concord takes control of it or not.
yeah, I think that's a
guess
major
what I
concession on our
understand is
part.
When I saw the holding basin before it was covered, it had sloping sides. The earth slopes down to where the holding basin.
Well, right now, the
Starts,
earth
now
slopes
it's
down a
flat.
little bit on one side, the side we were standing
and
at
so
the
that's
last
been- That's
visit.
been filled in. a
And it's
lot.
been filled in
Yep.
flat to the other side, yeah.
So
With the cross,
where is the wall is going to be built?
they're going to have machinery sit in the middle of that
Yeah,
and dig the wall along the outside of that, all the way up to the,
and that's gonna come down, the wall's gonna come down out, so it contains the contaminated material.
it's gonna go from the grade all the way down to the bedrock.
Well, when you say grade, you're talking
The
about
grade
3
is
feet.
current
The
grade.
current grade.
No, the
yeah,
current grade.
The current grade.
Going
Okay.
from the current grade, the wall is gonna go there. Then there's gonna be a cap on top of that, and there's gonna be 3 feet of soil on top of that. And there will, and
And if
probably the wall will go inside of that area a little bit so that there can be I think the sloping areas on the side are gonna be still within the. It's gonna slope down on the outside of the,
And the cap is probably gonna extend, over, further
cap.
out, over the cap, over the wall.
I
So
think,
it's,
I'm with
I-
Fred, I'm with Fred's discomfort about, I would like to see a diagram. If they're proposing changes, I think we need a diagram, a map, a plan that shows what it's gonna look like. Because we're all making assumptions about what they're gonna do because they're changing it.
okay, so we wanted the, and we want a diagram.
Yeah. Basically,
Diagram,
a cross-section diagram and also an indication of the outline of it on a plan view.
Yeah,
all right,
because
Okay.
one thing I'm thinking is, if 2 feet of dirt isn't enough, maybe 4 feet or 5 feet is. And then digging down an extra 2 feet shouldn't be that much of a problem.
digging down what's already installed isn't gonna happen. It just means, I mean, they might
Anything-
dig
anything-
out
anything
inside,
Can happen now, they might argue with us, but,
okay.
um,
But they're not gonna change the fact that the grade they've got now, that's the level that the wall is gonna be built to. So if we want them to dig out any of that building A material, which based on the characterization, maybe we will do that. That means that the cap is not gonna reach over the edge of the wall and will not be as effective as a
yeah,
cap.
but that's,
or
Right.
the wall will, terminate further subgrade. In other words,
That
it'll
would be nice, but I don't think they're talking about being able to do that.
How deep is the wall gonna be? It's not gonna be right to the surface. I thought it was gonna be within like 3 feet.
I thought they were going to build it to the grade that it's currently at.
But that-
And then they're
that's
gonna
something
put
we-
stuff on top of that.
okay, so the current grade is designed to be a certain distance below the final grade.
3 feet plus the
3
size
feet.
of the cap is
Oh,
what they
plus
were
3 feet plus the cap,
3 feet plus the cap. The cap would go over that grade that's there.
so you're allowing for a 1 foot thick cap,
Well, I don't know how thick the cap would be.
So that's something
I'm
that we
not sure
need to.
how far,
if there's 2 feet fill on top of it.
3 feet, okay. I'm not sure that,
So that's what we need. We need to find out, how far below grade, the cap will terminate.
okay.
And how thick the cap is gonna be. I don't think we don't have that
I've been
information.
thinking a concrete cap,
No, it's not gonna be a concrete cap. It's gonna be a clay gravel cap. It's not gonna be concrete.
How thick will it-
That's what I thought.
That's
When
not
all this
gonna
started, I thought it
that's
was
not
gonna be,
prevent anybody from,
Okay, do you want me to write
Okay,
this or
yeah,
you wanna
sure.
write this to Kara? Because we want that, if they've got some of this information, it would be great to be presented that at the meeting and.
yeah.
if you can send me a copy of the
Yeah,
notes, I
that'd be
can.
a good idea.
But the trouble is I'm going away next week. And I don't know if I'm gonna have time to get any comments together at all.
Then let me do this one.
All right, can we actually move on? We got some
Okay.
questions. I'd like to move on to, the, building E, recharacterization.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
first about they talk about remedial sampling, the soil removal document we covered. And the new documents have, pictures of sampling grids, on
Yeah.
a 30 foot.
Well,
Square.
that's pretty much right there, yeah. That's an
And-
example of it right
And
there.
the soil removal documents, it's called remedial sampling or confirmatory sampling.
Yeah,
Now, I assume that this means you dig it all out and then you sample to confirm that what's there is clean. Is that,
I think what they're
Correct.
gonna do, I think it's gonna be, iterative. I think they're gonna dig, they're gonna sample. If it's still there, they're gonna dig some more. Until it gets down to, well, it's basically gonna be below ROT levels. There's not gonna be any rails for the, building E area. So it's gonna be, it's whatever is above the ROD limits. Which is one part per million for PCBs, 2.7 for uranium. Anything above that's coming out. There's not gonna be any, they're not gonna try to fudge the numbers and include the RALs like they did before.
Soil removal document, I thought implied that they've got the existing samples. And they had a diagram, a color diagram that showed how deep.
Right,
You
that,
had
did
to
you,
dig
did
to
you
get
take a look,
those out.
that's what that is right there. Each drawing is 2 feet in thickness.
Okay, that removes one of my questions. It seemed to me that
1 feet, 2 feet, 4
Yeah.
feet.
30 feet was I was wondering if there was any justification for 30 feet.
That's building E, is also the courtyard too. I got some major questions about that. I'd like to move on to
Okay.
that for at least for a little while anyway.
Okay.
There's areas here that they're not sampling. There's grids that they're not sampling, okay? And what they said was that, at these particular grids, they tried to sample, but they hit refusal. And so, can I see one of those?
Just one?
Yeah, just one.
Okay.
Okay, now, basically what you're looking at here, I'm sorry, you can't see this, Nick, but these are gonna be in the Board of Health office. If you wanna take a look at them,
Okay,
but it's basically red is dirty. Green is, below the ROD levels, cleanup levels.
Well,
And this is.
So I don't know if
Yeah,
you can,
I see it. Yeah, I can see it. That's good.
so this one is the 4 foot to 6 foot level that I'm showing you, whereas we're each looking at a different level. So
Oh,
there's
that's the
different,
difference. Okay.
different levels between each one.
Yeah,
And you're looking at the gray areas as being not sampled because of refusal?
yeah, well, first of all, what we're looking at here is what's in red is dirty, so it's essentially, it's above the cleanup levels. What's in green,
Mhm.
is below or at the cleanup levels. But if you notice here that the gray ones, look at, I mean, there's a lot of gray cells there. And they didn't sample those cells, and I was trying to find a reason why. But what they're saying is, they hit refusal when they tried to sample those locations. And, they figured it wasn't worthwhile enough to continue to try to, you know,
Is that because,
break through the, the refusal.
but isn't that because they're gonna dig that out anyway?
Well, I don't know if they're gonna dig it out,
Okay.
and they're not gonna dig it out if it's not dirty.
But how are they
Uh,
not gonna?
This
so-
stuff right here, so what they're saying is all the red cells have gotta go. They're gonna be taken off site because they're above the standards. The green cells are okay, and some of these green cells, what they're saying is, they're gonna be putting them aside. And they're gonna be used to, backfill the building A,
Mhm.
once they get the contamination out. So they're gonna be set aside.
So you're concerned about what's gonna happen to the gray cells?
Yeah, I mean, look at those gray cells. Look, they're right beside some pretty contaminated red cells.
Okay.
And I don't think, when they say refusal, they use the geoprobe, and a geoprobe, hits refusal pretty easily. I've used them.
Geoprobe means what?
It's a push, it's a push.
Okay,
In other words,
they push a pipe down
Yeah.
and bring up a sample.
they use a truck mounted hammer to push the sample down. Sampler's about 2 feet long, and inside it has an acetate liner. So they use the hammer, to knock it into the ground. It can only go they sample every 2 feet. So at the end, they'll hammer it into the ground to the 2 foot level, they'll pull it up, they'll take out the liner, they'll cut the liner, they'll examine it if it's radioactive. You know, but that soil, depending on, then they'll take that soil, and they'll use, they said they were gonna analyze that soil on site to determine whether or not it either meets the criteria for clean soil or whether it has to go offsite or not.
In one of the documents, they said they would have a trailer with a.
Yeah,
with the
that's what they're gonna
sapling,
use to analyze this
So
for.
they'll sample these things as they're doing it.
Yeah,
So,
And it
so we
sounds
think
like
they'll sample the gray site part two
They
to
say that
decide whether
they-
that goes in the green pile or the red pile?
They say they can't. Because there's refusal. In other words, when they hammered the geoprobe down, it just stopped. It wouldn't go any further. And
So they're gonna dig out this thing that's right next to it, but they're not gonna dig out that or enough to test it?
yeah, and I don't think that to me doesn't fit quite right. If there's refusal there, you know, what's causing the refusal? Is it the building footing? It might be that. But if there's refusal there that they weren't aware of, maybe that's something that should be investigated further. Because what if there is contamination in that gray area? And this is really their first shot at characterizing building E.
Okay,
So.
so we wanna see sampling of the areas that were
I want,
used by the geoprobe.
and I wanna,
yeah, in 30 feet, you can just move over 5 feet and see if. The refusal, maybe there's a big rock there that it won't
yeah,
go in.
Yeah, it's just very
move it
easy to
over
stop a
bit
geoprobe.
and
geoprobe is probably the easiest piece of equipment to stop because of refusal. Uh,
I'll
Well, do
bet.
we wanna just say, we want you to assume that any area that refused, you have to dig out?
they needed to determine what the refusal, what caused the refusal. Is it building footing? Can they work around it?
Okay, can you write that up or you want?
I can write it up, sure. I just don't know whether I'm gonna be able to get these comments to them. The comments, these comments on the building e-characterization, they're due on the 26th.
And
And
what other comments did you have on the building characterization?
the other comments I had, see what else, that was the main, that was the main comment I had.
Mhm.
I might have had another one too. I should have written them down. But that was the main one though.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, you got another one. How are they gonna backfill this? Let's suppose when they get out all the contamination. You know, and even the stuff in the gray, if it's contaminated, to get it out. So all the excavation has been done now, okay? How are they gonna backfill this? The way I visualize it is they're probably gonna have two piles.
Mhm.
One pile of material that's clean enough, i.e. below the record of decision levels, to go back in as backfill. Okay, and the other pile is gonna be imported fill from someplace else. So if they have these, I don't think they're gonna mix them.
Well, this raises another question to me, which is the characterizing the nature of the backfill. You would hope that they are using stuff like gravel and that they're going to compact it so that it's stable and it's not going to collapse in the future during rains or something. If there's a lot of organic matter in there because they're using topsoil, it's just going to compress over time. So is
that's
there a
actually-
statement or a standard for what they're putting in there? It needs to be stable.
Well, and that's the other thing is that the most of the backfill for this area, if you're gonna be going down 10 feet or whatever, you want backfill that you can build on top of. This is
yeah.
within the,
There are standard practices for, I've been looking at a series called Practical Engineering on YouTube. And, there's standard practices for soil like this. If you want it to be stable, you've got to use the right types of soil, gravels sorts of soils, and then you've got to put in a layer of it, and you've got to compact it so that it isn't going to settle.
It
And you
has to
put in
be
the-
compacted, you're right.
So, and then, so anyway, so that may be defined someplace, that there's some standard that they're following, but we should make sure of that. I guess what makes me uneasy about it is they're taking soil from one place and they're using it here, which means they didn't order it from some supplier who's, gonna supply something against the standard.
Well, except that a lot of this stuff has been characterized better than what might come in from
It's
outside.
been characterized
You know,
chemically.
Delia,
but
for
it's been
instance, wanted as
characterized-
much,
It's been characterized chemically, not mechanically.
this is true. But this stuff is coming from out from under a building anyway, right?
It should be okay. I just don't
Yeah.
know. It can't, I'm just telling you.
Okay, so we want to we want to know what the backfill plan for this area is. And
Yeah.
we want to be sure that it's gonna be stable enough to build on and compact it.
And we want to make sure
Yes.
that they compact, I'd like to see them compact in 2-foot lifts. So in other words.
Yeah,
they-
also, yeah. If they're gonna be slopes, they've gotta be proper slopes and they've gotta be stabilized.
And I'd like to see, the other thing is, I wanted to see is, all on-site generated backfill to be put at the bottom of the excavation and the imported fill to be put, above that, rather than vice versa. So if you have these two piles, the, on-site generated backfill, would be put at the bottom. And then such that the, imported fill would be placed on top of it.
Why would you do that?
It's another level of protection, that's all.
Protection from what?
Protection from any kind of chemical hazards in the backfill that they might have missed when they're sampling. Because, understand that just because it's been sampled, that's just a spot check. It's just a sample. There's a lot of, in a 30-foot by 30-foot grid, they have one sampling location. Well, what about the rest of the grid? What about the other 30 by 30 feet?
Okay.
I mean, it's very possible that they could miss something. This is just another level of protection.
Yeah, I wondered if there's any, does anyone have any idea of what's a reasonable amount of spreading for this stuff? 30 feet square is about, it's a little bigger than the size of this room.
Yeah, and when
So
you're
you don't
proposing one
drop down in
sample,
the middle of it.
Yeah.
what about
What's it
the
look
stuff
like?
over there?
What's it look like 3 feet away?
Yeah, yeah, so,
So we're concerned about we're concerned that the sampling grid was too big.
I'm not concerned so much about that, I'm concerned that they could have missed some, they're not gonna do any more than,
Well, it's an expensive.
yeah,
capability.
Okay, so
they're saying.
So the two comments that we have right
Yeah.
now are first, that we wanted the areas that the geoprobe was refused,
Yeah, they want that
more-
further investigated and sampled.
more sampled and
Yeah.
appropriately disposed of.
Yeah.
Right? And we want a backfill plan for this thing. We want to be sure that it's going to be stable enough
That is.
to build
that's
on, that
compacted.
it's compacted in 2-foot lifts, and that the generated backfill will be at the bottom of the excavation with the imported
exactly.
fill on top.
It's
okay.
just another level of
And-
protection
and are
from anything that
Do
might
you
be
think you
there.
would be able to write that up?
I can write that up, yeah.
Okay,
So this is due the 26th of February. She wanted our comments for that. Now I'm gonna be going away. I'm gonna be away all next week.
can you do it tonight?
No, what I'll probably do is I'll probably do it when I come back. And that will give you guys, if you wanna take a look at the document, any more comments that I can insert too.
Yeah.
So if you have, I
So
sent
you get back when?
I get back the 24th.
Okay.
So Nick, I sent, everybody in the committee, the building E pre-characterization and courtyard pre-characterization on February 5th. So you should have that in your February 5th inbox.
Looking, hold on. I think I
just to
looked
let
at it.
you. And I sent that out to everybody on the fifth.
What was that? Oh,
The pre-characterization, the building E,
right,
courtyard, pre-characterization. Everybody got that on the fifth. Now, my other question is, what
so
the
we
heck?
had. So we are not, except for.
Yeah.
Um,
What the heck is this? All right, this is the courtyard,
uh-huh,
okay? These are the only places they're gonna sample in the courtyard. Is that, there's no way that's enough sampling. Now, they have historical samples here. Maybe
okay, so
they,
that's another comment, is you think that,
I think the amount of sampling on the courtyard is insufficient. Because they only have six cells that they're going to sample here. What about everything else?
okay,
You see what I mean, Fred?
Yeah.
okay, that's still the same document we're talking about, so that's a third comment.
Yeah. And those are the only comments I had on the. Did you get that, Nick? Did you get that?
Yeah,
building
I'm looking
EC?
at it now. I just,
Okay, so
it's
So we
endless thinking.
the phase one soils. You submitted comments already and you feel comfortable that it's everything except what Ray
I
commented.
submitted, that's on the, remedial action work plan. Yeah,
The site-wise soil,
Yeah,
100%.
phase one. Yeah.
Phase one,
that's the remedial action work plan.
Right.
That went out. That
Right.
went out, I forget what day
Yeah,
it was that
but she still said she would take comments from this meeting on that. So
Okay.
you're gonna send her the Rays, or you want me to summarize Ray?
If you can summarize Ray's, cause I'm gonna be really.
Okay.
And I'll do the building E
The courtyard.
pre-characterization, yeah, and the courtyard. And I'll get that out to her by, when I come back. I won't be able to work on it until then, but,
Okay, I'll try to summarize this stuff and send an email to you with
okay,
what we said. so-
Okay.
So you don't forget anything that I have on my list.
Yeah.
Pam will send Ray's comments. Can we look over Ray's comments and see if they were already dealt with in the comments in the response that you sent?
um.
So in
Yeah,
the introduction, he was concerned about the availability of the documents to the public and placing them on websites during the construction.
okay,
And they only estimated 16 months of active construction, how is the remaining 20+ months characterized? It was the remedial action contractor. Do we have additional details on why a remedial action contractor was not selected?
okay, I know, they're in the process of selecting one now. It's down to, between two companies.
Okay. And, are all the documents on the website? That's something to ask about, whether we can put more of the documents on the website.
Okay,
The subcontractor shall cooperate with others with work by others at no additional cost, and shall not cause or allow delays from the monitoring or waste transportation to incur any agency fines or delays. And the question was, I don't understand how this works. So maybe that's something she could just address at the